Welcome to episode 14 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary with Catherine
and Kristen, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find.
Hey, Kristen.
Hi, Catherine.
So we're starting a new book today, which is always exciting.
Yes.
We're going to be reading Bitten by Kelley Armstrong. And it's the first book in the Women of the Other World series. And like a lot of books that we are discussing, I got into this book through you. But how did you get into the series?
So I feel like this is sort of maybe a more hidden gem sort of a book. Like it doesn't have the cult following that a lot of our other books that we've done so far have.
Yeah.
I actually remember, and like I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it, I remember discovering Kelley Armstrong as an author through one of her YA series. I was working in my school library. So I was already an adult teacher and I was working in the library and I was just putting books, I was like restacking books, like reshelving. And I found one of her books on the shelf and it looked like something that I would like to read.
Yeah.
So I read it. And again, like it's super juvenile. It was a junior high library. So like, you know, it's 14, 15-year-olds. So, you know, it's one of those books that I really liked as an adult. But like in saying that it, you know, it does have, you know, you can tell that it's written for young adults.
Yeah.
But again, this was probably like 10 years ago. So the genre has progressed
for sure.
a lot since then. But yeah, so I read it on a prep period when I was supposed to be working and I really liked it. And so I researched her to see what else she had and found that she had this whole series of adult genre, but it was set in the same world. Like it was about the same sort of thing.
Oh, cool. I haven't read The Darkest Power, so I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so it's all like based on the same people in the same sort of world. So I started on Bitten, and yeah, I got, there was like 8 or 9 books out at that point. So I went through all of them, and they are really nice to look at as well. So that certainly helped like feed the addiction of buying the physical books because they look really nice, right, on your shelf. So I had a lot to get through and I really liked them. And it felt good to support a Canadian author.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for me, like I already said, I got into it through you, lovingly forcing it onto me. I was basically immediately hooked too. It's an interesting series for me because I don't often love when it changes perspectives like per book, but each book obviously follows a different woman and all of the women are such strong characters, but also flawed. And they're just very easy to like get into a new perspective and be okay with it, which I didn't expect. Cause like you read the first one and you're like, I'm going to love this person and no one else. And that's how I normally am with books. I don't think I actually finished the entire series. But I did love the ones I read. There was just a trope that came up later on that I was kind of like, not so sure about. But that was, like you said, maybe 10 years ago. I don't know when we actually read them originally. But I'd be willing to try to get through them again for sure to see how I feel about them now.
Yeah. And I will say, like, I'm not saying that they're all gems. Like a lot of them are really, really good. There was a couple that I sort of was like not as into.
Yeah.
But again, like she writes primarily about the women, hence why it's called Women of the Otherworld series.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like the focus is on flawed but powerful women who don't need no man.
But
And
often
it's
get a
all,
man.
but often get one in the process because it is like, it's a romantasy.
Yeah.
So, obviously she ends up getting her man, but it's often not traditional.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not a traditional boy meet girl, fall in love, have a fight, and then make up. It's not that sort of a relationship.
Yeah.
And she's very good at writing variety. So like there's like 7 or 8 different women featured in this 13 book series.
Mm-hmm.
And they are very apparently and very obviously all different women.
Yeah.
And they all have their own stuff going on. They all have their own flaws. They all have their own quirks. And it's just really nice to see such variety.
Yeah. The thing that I like the most is that they are flawed, I guess, because it's not something that you often see in characters, especially female characters. Because, like, you're lucky to get female characters in some books, and then normally they're just perfect. So it's really nice to actually get flawed characters and a different array of flaws in the characters
Yeah.
that she has. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, a lot of times women are sort of plot devices, right?
Mm-hmm.
They keep the plot moving forward, but they don't really do a lot else. So I really like seeing that these books are formatted around women.
Yeah.
And again, so I think this book and this series sort of started like 20 years ago. We've come really far as a society in terms of women-centric stories, women-centric films, and like women not just as a romantic like plot device.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really refreshing at the time to see it at that time.
Yeah. To see women as the focus, definitely.
Yeah. So just a heads up, we are not a spoiler-free zone and things might get a little saucy. So just a little bit about Kelley Armstrong herself. We've already spoken that she is a Canadian fantasy and mystery author, famous for her young adult and new adult series. Her most famous is her Women of the Otherworld series, which consists of a whopping 13 novels and 11 novellas. But she is a very prolific series writer with 11 other series to her name, plus like a host of collaborations with other authors, plus some like standalone, like one-off novels. Her most recent series, A Rip Through Time, was released this past May.
So obviously we're going to be discussing, as we said, her Women of the Otherworld series. And the first book is Bitten. And it follows Elena Michaels as she fights between her werewolf instincts and the human life she longs to have. And, bonus, she catches a murderer in the process.
Right. So this week we are looking at chapters 1 to 6. If you have a copy of the physical book, there are no chapter numbers. So we are doing the prologue to Hunt. So each chapter has a title instead of a number. However, the digital ebooks, you will find the chapter numbers. So chapters 1 to 6, prologue to Hunt. So we start with our main character. This book is told in the first person, so we are getting a look into our main character's head, Elena Michaels. So she is in her bed and she is restless and she can't sleep. And she just sort of says, "Oh, I really need to." And you sort of immediately go to, like, I guess the way she's forming her thoughts is sort of like a drug addict sort of a thing. She's like, "Oh, I really need to." And she said she's got a headache and she's getting really twitchy. So immediately you think of like she's jonesing for something.
Yeah.
So she gets out of bed and she says that there's a person sleeping next to her and his name is Philip. Mm-hmm. So assuming that's her significant other. She has clothes hidden. She says, like, I reach for the clothes that I have hidden because she doesn't want to open her drawers and potentially wake him up. And then she says she doesn't even have time to drive somewhere safe. So again, like, she's not even, we still don't actually know what it is she's jonesing for or what she has to go do. But she says she doesn't even have time to drive somewhere safe. She walks until she finds an alley. She goes down the alley and starts taking her clothes off. So right away, it's sort of like, whoa, what?
It's a wild turn.
It is a wild turn. And she makes the change into a werewolf, which she said is like super painful. It's like you're being like flayed alive. And I find this is actually a really good aspect to her writing of the character, because a lot of times we sort of they discount that in the book in a lot of books when they're writing werewolf tropes, right? Like they don't talk about the pain that there must be when your entire anatomy is
being
changing.
Shifted. Yeah, it seems like wild.
Yeah. So she is not shy in saying that it is really super painful, but she makes the change into a werewolf. She says her senses are better, but as a werewolf, she really has to concentrate and strain to understand human speech. So another thing I really like about how she's written the werewolves is in their wolf form, they become a lot more wolf-like than human. Mm-hmm. So unlike when we did A House of Earth and Blood and we had Danica who could like talk as a wolf and she was essentially a human in
a wolf form. Yeah.
It's not like that. Like she can't talk, and she can't directly understand humans and she obviously has better senses, and she also has wolf sort of instincts, we'll say, and wolf tendencies and wolf urges. Mm-hmm. So she's in this alley and she sees this man who's really suspicious. So she starts following him because she says that wolves are suspicious and curious by nature. So she describes it almost like stalking him. So he's going down the alley. So she sort of like is creeping behind him, seeing what he's doing, hiding behind things so that if he turns around at a noise, it doesn't see her. She says that she thinks he's good quarry to stalk because he's the type that won't run, which means that she can contain her instinct to kill him as long as he doesn't run. In other words, she's saying that as a wolf, her wolf instincts override her human instincts. And if she's sort of stalking a prey, as soon as it runs, her urge to chase him will override everything else, which is, that's an animal thing. Like a lot of animals do that.
Yeah.
But it just shows that at one hand, she's conscious of, it's so interesting, but difficult to explain.
Yeah.
It's like she's conscious of the fact that she is a human, but at the same time, the wolf instincts that are in her override everything else. So she's saying, like, she can identify that he's the type not to run, which is why she picks to stalk him, because she knows if he started to run, she would chase him down and kill him.
Yeah.
And then she also makes a remark saying, like, her stomach isn't super empty. Like, she doesn't have a ton of hunger pangs. But if she did, she would eat him too. So, delicious lunch, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Like,
definitely interesting. It's not, I guess, I don't know. I feel like werewolves, they obviously bite people. Duh.
mm,
In all of mythology, obviously werewolves bite. But I don't think eating full, like killing and eating, is something that you normally hear about because it is very kind of taboo because it's cannibalism.
yes, yes, it is. However, she says like she doesn't. So the dude sort of like turns away from the alley and goes back to his car. She considers that a win for
Mhm.
her and her wolf because she stalked him. He was a little bit nervous. So he turns away from the alley, like turns around and goes back to his car. So she's like, yes, I won. I frightened him off. But then she says she sort of needs somewhere safe to run. She has this urge to run. She has to go somewhere safe. So she goes to what she calls the ravine. She loves the run. So she goes to this like stretch of woods,
Mhm.
whatever. Loves the run. Uh, she says, well, her wolf does and her body does. That's what she says. Like her wolf
Mhm.
loves it and her body also loves it because she's getting exercise. Um, she runs into a coyote and she says that animals have a strange reaction to her because they don't recognize her scent. She smells human, but she looks like an animal. So they sort of have a little like stare down and they growl at each other. Um, and even though she's bigger, the coyote attacks her and they're fighting. And she sort of lets her wolf side take over at this point. Like, and I will say, when she is a wolf, she mostly lets her wolf side take over. So, if she feels threatened, she growls. If somebody is attacking her, she attacks back. She doesn't act with the human side of her brain
Mhm.
ever when she's a wolf. So she fights with this coyote. A second coyote joins in and injures her. And she assumes that the two coyotes are mates. So she kills one and the other one runs away. So, she has a nice little, like a wrestle. I don't know. She's nonplussed, we'll
Yeah.
say, with this. Like, it's just something. She's not perturbed by it at all.
No, and they attacked her, so
Yeah.
fair.
So she goes back to the alley. She gets her clothes. I guess she hid them. And she says that she doesn't like that it ends like this, closed, like in a dirty alley. She says, like, she should be in a clearing with her pack, content and sated. She doesn't like sneaking around the alleys and hiding her clothes there and, like, you know.
Mhm.
But she says that she left that world and she's not going to go back. So we can sort of get that she has a pack, but she's choosing not to live with them. Um, then she tells us that she lives in the city of Toronto. So again, like, it's just a nice, like, there's not many, I find there's not too many books set in Canadian cities.
Mhm.
So, and this one is only sort of vaguely set in a Canadian city. She doesn't stay in Toronto for too long.
Yeah.
Um, but she says that she's annoyed. She isn't normal. She says, like, if I'm a human, I should not be out here and about downtown Toronto at 4 o'clock in the morning. Like, really, for if she was a normal woman, it would not be safe for her in the middle of downtown Toronto at 4 a.m.
Very true.
But she's not normal, so she doesn't mind being down there.
Yeah.
She gets home. Philip wakes up and he's mad at her that she went out. And he says it isn't safe and they should figure something else out. Um,
You can see where he's coming from.
yeah,
It's not very safe to be out at 4 a.m. Well, alone and not out with friends or out like on random
Yeah.
weeknights to just wake up and the bed's empty. I'd be annoyed if my partner just got up and left without waking me up to say, "Hey, sorry, I need to go for a bit."
Yeah.
That would be an issue.
Yeah. And I guess he obviously doesn't know what she is
Yes.
and doesn't realize that she has this urge that she needs to take care of. But I guess she says that she's really lucky to have found him because, and this is a reoccurring theme with Philip. Apparently, he's a very patient character. So all of her eccentric activities, he just sort of ignores.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, like, he's so patient and kind, but it's just a matter of time before she screws up. So she's convinced she's going to screw something up and they'll break up.
Yeah.
She says she feels like she doesn't fit in this city life. I guess a little bit of time passes. I don't know if it's the next day or the next week. It doesn't really get into it. But she shows up at Philip's mom's house with a gift. I guess it's Mother's Day. Philip had to work, so he's not coming until later. I would not, well, I mean, I guess maybe I would now.
Yeah, but she's not where you are now.
No. If I was at the beginning of a relationship with somebody, and I mean within the first year or two, I don't know if I would go to my boyfriend's mom's house for Mother's Day with a gift to hang out.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to say because, they are living together. So clearly, I don't know. I feel like I probably would, but she also thinks he is coming at this point. Like, he's working and she's expecting him to show up. So she's like, oh, I'll just go and he'll show up at some point. So, I can see her.
I guess. But then we learn that her own mother is dead. And she grew up with foster moms and didn't really get close to any of them. So she doesn't really have a close family to spend holidays with.
Mm-hmm.
She also mentions that she finds it really hard to interact with humans. So another thing I really enjoy about this book is humans are considered, according to these werewolves, like a completely separate entity. Like she is not a human.
A different species.
She does not consider herself human at all. And neither do the other wolves.
Mm-hmm.
They're not human. They don't try to be human. But she said the reason she finds it hard to interact with the humans is that her childhood was really screwed up. And you can imagine, her mom died, and if she said she wasn't close to any foster moms, that means she obviously went through several foster homes. So, you can sort of get the gist of how screwed up her childhood was.
Mm-hmm.
And then she sort of said when she was on the cusp of adulthood, she was bitten. And she has spent the past 9 years with other werewolves. And then she only left them last year. So something happened last year that made her leave her werewolf family. So that's why she sort of says that interacting with humans is hard for her. Although, I mean, she managed to get a boyfriend out of it,
Yeah.
a partner.
And it's only been a year.
Exactly.
They live together.
That's very fast. That is swift.
Mm-hmm.
Although I can't say that because my partner and I moved in together after 6 months.
Yeah, we bought a house together after I don't even if I did 8 months maybe. So
yeah. So, who are we to judge? So we meet Philip's family now. Also, I hate his name. I hate that his name is Philip.
It's such an old person name. And I don't say that in a mean way.
Yeah.
It's older.
I apologize if anybody knows any Phillips, but I'm terribly sorry. So his family consists of his sister Diane and his parents Anne and Larry. So they all seem like nice people.
Mm-hmm.
really. Like they're nice people. They're happy she's there. They're not, they're not awkward at all. They're happy to see her. They're just nice people.
They're not asking when they're going to start having babies.
Yeah. Um, Elena then sort of reveals like in her head. So a lot of the stuff she reveals is in her head. She doesn't say a lot of stuff out loud. She says that she doesn't do relationships and that her one and only before this was catastrophic. So she sort of led this really sheltered life, I feel like, and I don't mean sheltered like innocent. I mean like, she was in foster care for all of her childhood. Then, she goes to university and meets her one relationship. And we find more about this relationship a little bit later. And then ends up being bitten.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's with werewolves and, they're secluded and sort of, they don't interact with a lot of others. So
Mm-hmm.
it sort of adds to her like seclusion. And now she's only just out for a year and she's already in this new relationship and living with someone. It just seems that she's been very isolated and like
Yeah.
her whole life. She
Yeah.
hasn't had a ton of experiences, is how it seems.
Yeah. She hasn't had like of genuine love is kind of how I see it. Like she hasn't had like family love until probably one would assume the pack. And now she's getting it again here, which is a different experience, but still good.
Yeah. She talks about how her and Philip met. They were both working out late at night at the same like gym or the same like fitness club. And they start talking and chatting and then like I guess they keep meeting late at night to work out and eventually the talking turns into a post-workout juice. And then it turns into coffee and then it turns into dinner. And I guess she says that they moved in not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And she says that he brought up maybe them buying a condo together when the lease is up on her apartment. So she says that she's really happy. Like his family is really welcoming and accepting, and it's what she sort of wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So all in all, Philip seems perfect, minus the name. But he seems perfect in every other way.
Yeah.
She says that most werewolves, while they obviously live in the human world, they don't consider themselves a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that's sort of one thing that she wanted was to live the life that she dreamed of as a child with she wants a family and a career. And that obviously it wasn't her choice to become a werewolf. So she's, I guess, trying to hold on to that dream and maybe achieve it with Philip.
Mm-hmm.
We find out that she is a writer. She has a career in journalism. And she says that she finally feels like she's found some stability with Philip, even though she doesn't sort of reveal to him her wolfy traits. So she says, like, her wolfy traits are like she's difficult, she's temperamental, she's argumentative, but she doesn't reveal that to Philip. And I'm sorry, but this already to me is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Like,
I
if
completely
you
agree.
can't, right? Like, if you can't reveal all of your sides to a person, it's not a healthy relationship. And, not including the fact that she won't tell him she's a werewolf either. That's a big secret that sort of needs
Outing.
to be. Yeah. Again, there's a lot of info in this first little bit. So if it feels like I'm, popping around, like all these thoughts are streaming through her head at this point. She says that most werewolves are actually born, not made. She says that it's really rare for a human to survive a werewolf bite. So this is another little interesting bit of lore, I'm going to call it, for this world, is that werewolves are born. They're a species that are reproduced just like humans are. And yeah, so apparently a wolf bite is really hard to survive, but she did. She then admits that there are about 35 werewolves in existence. And to me, that's not very many for the whole world.
Yeah.
Like, that is quite a few.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And she says that only 3 of those wolves were made. The rest are hereditary. And then we get another little nugget. She is the only female wolf in existence.
Ooh.
The only one. Every single other one would be a dude. And I like it. I think that's an interesting turn. But I also, I just sort of feel bad for her.
Yeah, and it also is a bit tropey.
Yeah, she's special.
Yeah, but it kind of makes sense why, if most of them are born, obviously, if there's only 3 bitten, it's not really odd for 1 in 3 to be a girl.
Yeah, no, you're right.
But
she then sort of says that, under normal circumstances, her being the only female werewolf would be a prize fought over by every other werewolf, and she would constantly be kidnapped and fought over and whatever. But because of who bit her, somebody bit her and turned her. So because of who that person is, she has the protection of the pack. And the pack is uppercase P, pack. They are considered the ruling class of all the werewolves, all 35 of them. Woo. It's a real challenge to rule those 35. And so again, we sort of already talked about it, but she says that last year she cut herself from the pack, choosing to live as a human instead of a werewolf. She talks a bit about the tricks that she's sort of developed to help her sort of hide who she is while living with Philip. She says that she has a huge metabolism and eats a ton. So obviously she can't show to him that she eats as much as she could. So she picks up pre-dinner on her way home, which I love. If I had the metabolism, I would also do that.
Yeah.
She gets a pre-dinner on her way home so that when he serves her actual supper or actual dinner, it looks like she's eating a normal size. She also hides a chunk of provolone cheese behind the veggies and just eats bites of it. And I'm like, how does he not spot the giant chunk of cheese?
Yeah.
I don't understand how you don't spot it in your fridge. But
I would find it 100%. I have a nose for cheese.
And then she also said she only works out between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. to hide her strength and her stamina. So, which I really don't see. And I guess this is, one of his he's so patient sort of things, because not that I wouldn't be okay with someone working out between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. Yeah, fill your boots, do what you want to do. But at some point I'd be like, well, can I come?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And how do you say no?
Yeah. And well, that's her big issue with the walks at night.
Yeah. Anyway, she, I guess, after all of that information, she sort of jumps back into her brain and realizes that she's around people. And Philip's mom says she wants her to help plan one of Philip's sister's wedding shower. And apparently she's going to meet his whole family, and she's really excited about it. And it's it's one of those things where, again, like, she wants a family, and she's really excited about meeting his, and maybe he couldn't sort of fill that role for her,
Yeah.
which, again, not a great reason to be in a relationship with someone, but
True.
I'm allowing it because she's had it rough.
Yeah.
I guess she goes home and she's watching like really trashy TV. She like really likes it, and she says she really likes the trashy stuff because it sort of shows more of like the human condition, like it shows what humans are really like.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so then we have somebody named Jeremy who calls her and leaves a message on her machine. This was back when like answering machines were a thing. And Jeremy calls her and needs her to come back.
And out loud answering machines.
Yes, an out loud answering machine.
Because you can still leave messages on people's phones. Like, we're not that far into the future.
No, sorry. So yeah, he leaves the message on like an out loud answering machine. So they play the message and it's, hey, it's Jeremy. I need you to come back home. So Philip hears that message, and she has to come up with something all of a sudden and say, oh, sorry, that's my cousin, Jeremy. Mm-hmm. So he's like, oh, you should call him back. So, she tries calling him back a few times, and she says that he wouldn't have asked her if it wasn't serious. So she starts to worry that there's something going on. Philip suggests that she go visit him and see if everything is okay. So she's like, yeah, okay, like maybe I'll try calling a few more times over the next few hours, and if they don't answer, I'll get on a plane. Mm-hmm. Where does she end up? On a plane. So Jeremy lives in New York State. So this is actually where most of the book takes place, is in the state of New York. They live in this area, and I actually don't know if this place is real or not, Bear Valley, and they live on an estate called Stonehaven.
I'm sure there's a Bear Valley in New York State, just because there's probably a Bear Valley everywhere.
That's true, yeah. That's a good point. So I guess she got a taxi there. She's sort of annoyed because she thinks that they left this message that's like, oh, you need to get here now. And it was like really sort of urgent sounding. And now they're not answering the phone. So now she's like, thinks that they're purposefully not answering it. Yeah. Like thinks that they're being forgetful or not answering the phone.
Yeah. And you can understand why she's frustrated, obviously. He's like, call me back. And she's like, I'm fucking trying.
Yeah. We get a little bit more into her backstory. And again, this is like, this is really, I will say, like, I'm putting in a trigger warning right now because there's talk of sexual assault at this point in the book. So anyone triggered, skip ahead. It talks about her parents. They died when she was 5 in a car accident. And apparently she was so scarred by that accident, like she was in the car with them. And apparently she was so scarred that any like decent foster family that chose her originally couldn't handle her PTSD. Apparently she was great during the day, but as soon as night came around, she would scream her head off and not stop. So all those good foster families, like the ones that would be decent, would bring her back. So that's unfortunate. And I don't have much.
How good were they?
Well,
how good were the foster families?
I don't have much experience with the foster care system anywhere, really, apart from the fact that it's obviously not. It obviously has its issues, and there are significant problems that need to be addressed. But like, you would hope that a really good family would work, get her a therapist, like help work through the issues instead of just bringing her back like she's a damaged toy.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know much about the foster care system, so maybe that's a regular occurrence. I would hope not, but it's like that alone, you are in an accident and your parents die and you're 5 years old, and then people keep bringing you back because they can't deal with your trauma. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's damage on top of damage.
Yeah.
But then we learned that as she got older, she's a pretty girl. The husbands started choosing her instead of the wives. And they were choosing her for her beauty and the fact that she had psychological issues. And it's sort of, it's implied that she was raped a lot
Mm-hmm.
by her foster fathers. And again, like, I'm well aware of the foster care system that this happens, but the fact that it happened so often to her was really hurtful to read about, honestly.
Yeah.
Knowing that it's not a real person, but I'm sure
There are people that
people,
are in her situation. Yeah.
yeah, it was very upsetting to read about. Although I will say that what she decided, I don't find this super realistic. She says that she decided that instead of being angry with her situation and with these men, she would do what she needed to do to get herself out of that life. So, like, knowing that she didn't want to stay in the system, she would get straight A's, go to college, and eventually get a good job. And then it says that she also started running and lifting weights in high school. So the foster father stopped touching her then because she got, buff enough where she could defend herself.
Yeah.
Which, again, like, it's awful that that's what she had to do to stop her abuse.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even cool that a teenager had to go through that. But I'm aware that that is something that happens in society, and it's really terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So she arrives at Stonehaven in a cab, and the driver says that there have been problems with wild dogs, and a local girl was butchered, so it's not safe outside at night. So we sort of get where this is going to go now. Wild dogs are obviously sort of on the same vein as wolves, so immediately we're sort of getting the implication that a local girl was killed by wolves.
Yeah.
Clayton, aka Clay, was at the gate waiting for her. It describes him as having a southern drawl. So I assume he's, got that little twang. And she says she doesn't like him at all and wouldn't even let him touch her. Like, I guess he tried to, like, I don't know, touch her hand or her arm or whatever. And she was like, nope, get off me. Mm-hmm. So I guess they get out of the cab and start heading up to the house. And she says that the smells instantly relax her. So the smells of the house, the smells of the woods around the house. And she says she shakes it off on purpose. Like, she does not want to feel relaxed, and she doesn't want to consider that her home. So she makes it really clear. She doesn't want to enjoy being back here, which is sort of, I think. So again, we talked about how Kelley Armstrong is good at making flawed female characters. And I find that this is one of her it's one of Elena's obvious flaws.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she cannot see what is right in front of her. Like, throughout this book, she is going to struggle with the idea of home and wanting a home, wanting a family, mm-hmm. because she didn't have it growing up. She wants people that love her. She wants to love other people. And, she wants that sort of, I guess, white picket fence ideal.
Yeah, because that's what she grew up thinking was ideal.
But she doesn't realize that she has it all along. Like, she says she's relaxed there. She says she doesn't want it to be home. But obviously, just because you don't want something to be home doesn't mean it's not. Mm-hmm. Like, it's staring her in the face. Yeah. This whole book. And it's sort of what bothers me is, like, how can you not recognize this?
She willfully doesn't want it to be the case.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Anyway, Clay. So his name is Clayton, but he's mostly referred to as Clay for the whole book. He said he was waiting for her all day by the gate. And she was like, well, how did you know I was coming home? Like, I didn't leave a message. So she's sort of like, I don't understand how he knew that she was coming. Like, she didn't tell anyone she was coming. She said she tried to find Jeremy, who's the one that called her, but he was out for a run, quote unquote. So she was like, well, I'm going to go find him. And Clay was sort of like, well, no, he's out. Like, wait till he gets back. And she was like, no, you know, he interrupted my life for me to come here. So I'm going to go interrupt his life. Like, he can't call me here at the drop of a hat and then just not be here. Clay then like sort of ran off to warn Jeremy that she was coming. So she changed, and again, capital C, she changed into a wolf. And again, we've talked about how her wolf form sort of takes over her human part of the brain. And her wolf form was like super duper duper excited to be back in the forest. She was like running around the woods and like rolling in the grass and like rubbing up against the trees, like spreading her scent around. She said that as a human, she can deny that Stonehaven is her home, but her wolf knew that the woods were hers. Mm-hmm. So again, like it's another thing, like, you know, it's your home.
Yeah.
Just admit it already. Clay came in his wolf form. And just the juxtaposition of how she treats him as a wolf versus how she treats him as a human. Like, as a human, do not touch me. Don't come near me. I don't like you. As a wolf, they were playing together, running for each other, nipping at each other, tumbling, chasing. And she says that even though, like, she didn't want it as a human, she can't repress it as a wolf. So, like, this is sort of one of the things that infuriates me about her is how hot and cold she is with him. Mm-hmm. Like super cold as a human and then all of a sudden super hot as a wolf. And it's like, pick one.
Yeah.
But, you know, he has his own issues, so I get it. She hears gunshots and she's super confused. She was like, people don't hunt on Jeremy's land and he's got 500 acres. So, like, what is going on? What is the shooting about? She starts to go towards the gunshots because, like we said before, wolves are curious by nature, but the wolf Clay sort of like drives her off and won't let her go near it. And she says he goes so far as to sort of like, he nips at her painfully when she tries to go around him. So like he genuinely bites her sincerely because he doesn't want her to go near the gunshots. And again, this is another sort of part where the animal side really takes over when they're in wolf form, because as a human, he wouldn't hurt her. You know, I can say that having read the book. As a human, he wouldn't hurt her. But as a wolf, he's trying to protect her. And, you know, this is a very animal thing to do. Like, if you don't want a fellow animal doing something, what do? You hurt them.
Yeah.
So it's very animalistic what they do. They change back into humans and she's really pissed at him for keeping her away from that. And then she sort of deduces in her head that if they were on the property and nobody is doing anything to stop them, then they must be there with permission. So whoever is doing the shooting must have permission to be there. Elena then thinks to herself that it must have been a werewolf that killed the girl that the cab driver mentioned to her, but thought that it must have been a wild werewolf because the pack don't kill for sport. And it also said that non-pack wolves, so I guess there's pack wolves and there's non-pack wolves. Non-pack wolves were really scared to cross Clay, not Jeremy. It's Clay that everyone has an issue with. They said that last time a non-pack wolf made it onto pack territory, Clay tortured and dismembered him finger by finger. So they really have their own rules and their own sort of way that they do things.
Yeah.
And it is brutal. They're not a lovey-dovey happy like werewolf society, right? They're brutal when they need to be.
Yeah.
Jeremy is the alpha, and I guess Clay is his enforcer. So Jeremy's the alpha. Elena says he's a really good alpha. He manages to keep like absolute control over his base urges. So I guess sort of insinuating that Jeremy is one that when he transforms into a wolf, he can sort of keep the human side, right? And like he can keep control of his urges,
Mm-hmm.
and he can also make careful, good decisions. He also treats the non-pack members, who going forward we call mutts. That's what they're called in the book, mutts, the non-pack members. He treats the mutts fairly. But apparently they do say that if anybody threatens the security or the authority of the pack, they're punished.
Mm-hmm.
We learn a little bit about Clay and Jeremy. So Clay was a super smart academic. He has a PhD in anthropology on anthropomorphic religions. Didn't know that was a thing.
Nope.
Apparently he avoids humans as much as he can, but sometimes he has to take on like a brief teaching gig in a university to keep up with the academic world. And that's how Elena met him. And I guess they had enough of a thing going that she met everybody else. Jeremy and Elena seem to have a really good relationship, but I guess she talks to him now and she's annoyed that he called her. I guess she doesn't feel like it's a serious enough thing for her to be there. So she's annoyed with him, and he sort of reminds her, like, that was our arrangement. You left, and I can call you back if we have an emergency. And she sort of disagrees. She says, oh, I left the pack completely. Like, I'm not pack anymore. And sort of like, I don't want to be a member anymore. But Jeremy sort of like disagrees because realistically, she's got it pretty good at this point. Like, she's a member of the pack and therefore has their protection, but she's not actually hanging out with the pack. She's up in Toronto living her best life with Philip. So, like, if she didn't want to be a pack member anymore, that would make her a mutt, which, apparently it's not a sought after gig.
Very true.
Jeremy says that he's going to have a meeting the following morning when everybody is around. So she has to wait and find out why he called her at that point. She wants to know immediately so that she can like get the heck out as soon as she can. But he's like, no, like, I'm not going to tell you right now. Like, you'll have to wait and find out when everyone else does. So she's mad about it. And he just, I love that he just sort of like walks away and goes to his room.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not going to deal with you anymore. I'm going away. Goodbye. Clay sort of is sticking around, and she sort of looks at him and like barks at him. It's like, what do you want? And he actually says like something that's really adorable for me. And he says, you here forever. So that makes her like run out of the room and like beat a hasty retreat. And it sort of like implies, and we sort of get that obviously her and Clay had a thing, or at least he has a thing for her. Mm-hmm. There's definitely more to their relationship, a reason, if you will, for her to really dislike him.
Yeah, for sure. So Elena at this point kind of debates if she's actually going to stay. She thinks about leaving because Jeremy wouldn't tell her why she's even there, even though he called her and she came. But she knows that he might say that he wouldn't stop her. But clearly something's going on. So she's like, I may as well wait till the morning. What am I going to do? Like, go to the airport and sit there instead? Like, she's like, I'll just stay here and wait for the meet in the morning and figure it all out then.
Yeah.
Elena's kind of looking at her room, and like you said earlier, a lot of the stuff that we get obviously is in her head because it is first person. So there's a lot of her thinking, which
Yes.
gives the reader a lot of story, but also for us makes us jump around the place a lot. But
yeah.
Elena kind of says that Jeremy and werewolves as a whole don't really need to understand women other than to get them in bed. And when you're 10 times stronger, you don't actually have to ask, which is awful. But then she does kind of say that that's more of a mutt thing. I guess raping women is more of a mutt thing than a pack thing, which is good, ? It's good for the ones that we know, I guess, the pack. But
yeah, it's sort of like I feel like it's brushed over a little bit. Like they're not that they're not outraged by it, because they talk about how like they don't like the practice. Like it's not like they're like, oh yeah, rape as many women as you want, we don't care. But it's sort of one of those things that they just sort of let happen, which is equally bad. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
There's about 35 wolves. You can't really police every single thing that they're doing, especially when they're living all over the world, which is icky.
Yes.
Like they're sort of like they're picking and choosing what they police. And like, this is not one of the things they police.
Yeah. Which I guess it would kind of be hard to do anyway. What are you going to do? Run around and smell to see if a wolf has been near. So I understand logistically it doesn't really make sense. But maybe in the year 2022, they're policing that now. But I guess the pack is more careful since they just live in the one area. And mutts kind of seem like to roam around the world, kind of like you were saying. The pack members sometimes have girlfriends or like mistresses, but they never really have deeper relationships. Like you're never going to marry into a werewolf family.
Yep.
She also kind of in her head mentions again that only sons inherit the werewolf gene. So any daughters that are born to a werewolf and human couple are basically just ignored. But if a werewolf has a son, they are taken from their mothers. Elena kind of thinks about the fact that she was turned by someone that she trusted and loved against her will. And she was very upset and angsty towards Jeremy because he was basically her jailer, she felt at that time. And I guess she was more than he was expecting. He didn't really expect a woman to be as aggressive as her.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, she talks about, I guess, the reason why she's having this conversation with herself in her head is because she looks at her room and it's all like frilly and feminine and delicate. And she's like, they're assuming something about me because I'm a woman. Yeah. But, so I guess Jeremy sort of helped her during her transition. And she wasn't meek and mild like he sort of expected her to be, which is like, come on, man. Obviously, women have varied emotions.
Yeah, and if she was meek and mild, she probably wouldn't have survived. So she also thinks about a time that she basically escaped and sold her body to get away to Toronto. And like you said, that's something that at the time didn't really bother her because she had been raped so many times with foster fathers that it was just a way for her to get there.
Yeah.
She killed many animals and then some people, and Jeremy eventually stopped her. So from like the reader's perspective, he clearly loves her, Because if she was a mutt, he would have 1,000% killed her without like a second thought. But she's obviously special in general, but also to him.
But not in a romantic way.
No, my God, no. Sorry.
It seems like Jeremy is filling a paternal.
Exactly.
It's a paternal figure.
Yes. Yeah, that's like familial love, not like, romantic. So she wakes up in the morning and she's kind of unsurprised that Clay has an awareness of where she is in the house. So she like walks before she gets there across the hallway from each other. Like as she's leaving her room, she can hear him snoring. But then as she like turns down the hallway, he immediately stops and he like opens the door. So he is very in tune with her in general and where she is. And she basically knows that it's in case she tried to leave during the night, he would have woken up and stopped her. Jeremy's downstairs and Elena goes down and she asks if he's angry at her. Like if he's still angry at her are the words she uses. And he says that he was never angry at her and she was just angry at herself and scared of what she did. And this is another moment that like I really like that Elena struggles to read Jeremy's intentions. It makes her seem more real because like you get a lot of books where the main character is like spot on about how everyone else is feeling. And I'm like, that is so not me. I can't tell what other people are feeling most of the time. So
like the last book, Shadow and Bone, when Elena could see the greed sparkling in the Darkling's eyes because she knew him so much better after their one makeout session.
Or even like she knew that Jenya had like darkness flashed over her eyes. And I'm like,
that doesn't happen.
That's shit that I would not notice. Like you'd have to tell me and then I'd hopefully notice. I don't know. I like that she finds it hard to read.
Yeah. It's like, what was that just like that? What was that on your eyes? Oh, sorry. A darkness just flashed across my eyes.
It was literally the Darkling.
I'm thinking of something really upsetting right now.
Right? I don't think that happens.
If only that happened, the world would run so much better.
Oh, God. Anyway, so apparently now we get a bit of the backstory of why Elena, I guess, thinks that he should be angry at her and why she left. So 16 months ago, Elena went after a human selling werewolf information and she tried to discredit him and she tried to steal his proof, but she failed on both counts. So she killed him. And then that night she slept like a baby. The next morning when she woke up, she was shocked at how nonchalant she had been about literally murdering a human. And it's basically just another example of like the war between her human side and her werewolf side. But she is obviously trying to live a more human life. So this was something that I don't know if she can really get over it. She does realize that she was acting on her werewolf instincts of keeping the pack safe. And she also knows that that's exactly how Clay would have acted. And that's another thing that kind of scares her too. It's breakfast time basically. And Nick and Antonio show up. So Nick basically jumps her and kisses her. And I love Nick. And I don't think we really mentioned it, but there is also a show of this book. And show Nick is hot as fuck. And I love him a lot.
For anyone who has watched Schitt's Creek, Nick, our actor, is Steve Lund, who plays the role of Jake in Schitt's Creek. Just in case you're...
I've watched a few, but I don't know who that guy is. I can't. I must not have watched enough. No. I watched a few episodes, but I...
Okay, well, he's only in 5 episodes.
Oh, okay. But, like, I guess if you've seen it.
Minor character.
Yeah.
But
Okay, because I'm like, oh, I think I watched the first season of that, but I don't remember him. Anyway,
He's in a lot of Hallmark movies.
oh yeah, for sure. I can see that.
Yeah, he's very handsome.
Yes. Um, so yeah, so Nick like literally full on kisses her on the lips, like almost makes out with her. And then Antonio comes over and gives her a bear hug. And Antonio is Nick's father. So it's just another showing of like the very physical greetings that happen between werewolves.
Hmm.
Jeremy kind of comments that Elena has lost weight, and without her energy, her control will start to slip. So it's another point of how a werewolf's metabolism is much faster, and she obviously isn't eating enough with Philip, even with her extra meals. You kind of get a moment here where Elena already has her plate of food, and Nick and Antonio and Clay can go pick up theirs in the kitchen and then bring them back. But Clay kind of just looks at Nick, and Nick is like, yeah, I'll bring you a plate. Like, it's a very clearly Clay is dominant over Nick. And this is like the kind of the first moment that we get it.
And this is something that reoccurs throughout this book too, is Nick is very much submissive, a submissive wolf to Clay and even Elena as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Another character, Peter, shows up, and obviously there's more physical greetings. Elena asks when Logan will get there, and he's clearly part of the pack as well. But she's told that he can't come because he has to go to a court case, which is definitely interesting and not something that you'd expect of a werewolf unless they're like the one being accused. I guess you'd expect that.
Yeah.
Um, Elena kind of thinks about the fact that Logan is like, he has a legal career that is flourishing and he has a long-term girlfriend. Like, he's basically living the life that Elena thinks that she wants. He's a werewolf, but he is able to live like a human, and that is kind of exactly what she's trying to be.
But she, like, other than the fact that, like, she's finding it hard, like, managing her changes, and she doesn't like running around the city. She would rather have, like, I guess, an open, like,
Yeah.
woodsy area. I don't see how she's not succeeding. Like, she has a job as a journalist, and she's living in a house with her, like, living in an apartment with her boyfriend. So, like, I don't really understand why she thinks Logan's life is so desirable when she's basically doing the same thing. Like, how is he more successful at it than she is?
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's more she's clearly not as happy as she thought she would be. So she's like this, he's clearly doing it better, because if I were doing it this well, I would be happy too. And I think obviously she's wrong, but I don't think it's because of the human part of her life. I think it's because she's just denying herself. Apparently, Elena has been talking to Logan in the past 16 months, which pisses Clay off a lot because he assumed that she cut herself off from everybody else in the pack as well. And she says that she's only, in her head, that she's only talked to Logan. So it doesn't really feel like cheating to her because Logan also kind of has a life like hers. But obviously,
Yeah.
Clay has some jealousy issues here. Clay's backstory is brought up, and there was a pre-adolescent werewolf living like an animal in the swamps, which is incredibly unusual because hereditary werewolves, which are all men because it goes through the male line, have their first change when they are adults. So it's generally between the ages of 18 and 21. That means that for there to be a pre-adolescent werewolf, they had to be bitten. And like it was said before, it's really unlikely that people live through the change and through being bitten because it is so agonizing, and most people just die from the bite or die from like the aftermath. It's just super unlikely. So basically this child was 7 or 8 years old at the time that Jeremy went and got him. Um, he couldn't remember what happened to him or how long he'd been a wolf. He was more wolf than human, and he was completely unable to control his changes. So Jeremy, I guess, kind of brought him back home, and he thought that like meeting other children would kind of help civilize him, and make him more human, because obviously he'd been living his life mostly as a wolf up to this point. So we hear about two pack kids that are around the same age as Clay was, and that is Nick, who obviously we just met in person, and Daniel, who we don't know anything about. So when Nick was 8, he was brought to see Clay, and Clay leapt at him immediately and pinned him to the ground, which I'm sure is very pack wolf-like to like assert his dominance. And that's where it all started. So according to the stories that Elena's heard, Nick apparently pissed his pants immediately. So Clay let him live because he just didn't see him as a threat.
Yeah.
They kind of became friends, but it was more like Nick was an errand boy for Clay. And like, obviously Clay grew up and he's incredibly smart. So like he became better at controlling his instincts and acting human, but he still has the like wolf instincts and he has to fight them constantly. And sometimes he does lose, which is obviously hard for him because he's so smart that he knows he should be doing something differently, but his wolf brain takes over and there's not much he can do about it. So Jeremy finally, I guess, gets everyone together now and he tells them what's going on. And unsurprisingly, there is a werewolf in Bear Valley near Stonehaven, which is obviously very bold since all the mutts know that the pack own the territory there. So 3 days ago, a woman's body was found and they know it was a werewolf kill. But by the time that they like figured it out, it was too late. And the town is basically in an uproar about wild dogs. So Jeremy kind of gets down to the plan, which is, unsurprisingly, find the mutt. So he says Elena has the best nose, so she'll be, and then she just cuts in and she says, nah, brah, I'm leaving. There's a bit of discussion because everybody else is kind of confused. They're like, you're back here now. What do you mean you're not staying to help out? Jeremy doesn't really say anything, but Antonio says that the mutt dossiers are her job, so she's the most knowledgeable, and she says it used to be her job. And then Jeremy kind of decides that he needs to talk to Elena alone. So he kicks everybody out, and obviously Clay doesn't want to leave because he's pissed that she isn't back for good. So she kind of brings up an incident that apparently happened 6 years ago, which I guess was 3 years into her being a werewolf. But he apparently kidnapped her and locked her in a hotel room so that they could talk, which is very intense.
Yeah, there's quite a few questionable moments.
Yes.
In their relationship, which is, I guess, part of the reason why they're not together anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And
also flawed characters. Like clearly they both have their flaws, but like clearly what the Clay is, like they said earlier, he's going by his wolf instincts primarily as opposed to his human, since as a child he was mostly a wolf. So you can kind of see where he's coming from, but at the same time
it's not okay.
No. So Clay does leave, obviously, the room, but he thumps down by the door to eavesdrop. Jeremy kind of tries to convince her she's the only one that can find and identify the mutt without more chaos in town. And Elena says that if she does this, can she really leave the pack? But Jeremy doesn't want her to make a hasty decision. Like, she had a difficult time, obviously, adjusting to being a wolf in general. And she didn't grow up knowing about wolves existing at all. So he's kind of thinking that, like, if she just has a bit more time, she'll get used to it and she'll kind of get over it and she'll want to be with the pack. Um, we get another nod at the fact that the way she was changed made it more difficult. He tells her to think about it all and then make a decision and then come talk to him. He leaves her alone, and I guess Elena has a bit of time to think, and she's kind of annoyed at how reasonable Jeremy is being. Because he is the pack leader, so I guess he could just tell her to do what he wants and be done with it. But she kind of knows that she owes him, so she can't really say no. Like we kind of said earlier, she was a terror to him when she had been bitten, and she would bite him and fight him at every turn, and she refused to settle into being a wolf. And eventually, once they got over that, he helped her finish her degree and like helped her pay for it. And his guidance and his help is kind of the reason that she's able to have a life at all in Toronto, because mutts can't really control their changes, and that's one of the things that makes them mutts is they're killing and they need to constantly be on the move because they can't control themselves. So obviously after all of that, she has to agree to stay long enough to find the mutt. But she says, as long as when they find the mutt and dispose of it, she can leave without Clay or Jeremy stopping her. So we get back to the meet, and the plan, like we said, is to find and kill the mutt. So they kind of go through how they're going to do it. After the meeting, Elena calls Philip, and she literally goes into a long-winded lie about a car accident with Jeremy's wife and 3 kids that she now needs to watch. And Philip is very sympathetic, and if he wasn't so busy with work, he'd come out and help her, which, can you imagine how terrible that would be? Obviously, there are no kids, so that's
like
the
they would have to
issue.
Well, I feel like they would have to borrow some kids.
Really, though, like that's the only way you'd get through it.
But also, just sort of in addition to that, it just sort of goes to show how, I don't want to say the word trusting, but naive, I guess Philip is, because Elena sort of told him she has no family because she doesn't. Both of her parents died in a car accident, and she has no extended family. Like, she had no aunts or uncles or grandparents that she knew of. So she has grown up now without a family.
Yeah.
And for her to all of a sudden have a cousin with a wife and 3 kids, and Philip's just like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't think you had a family, but I'm really happy you have a cousin and I'm excited to meet them. And it's like, dude.
And also, they've known each other obviously for however long they've been dating, but she didn't mention this, but she's obviously close enough to Jeremy that he's letting her watch his 3 kids under 5. So clearly it isn't just a passing cousin relationship. There's clearly some trust there.
Yeah.
Based on this lie.
Yeah.
So after that, she goes to the study, and the study has a secret compartment, which is super cool. And Elena says that it holds the only items that would ever link them to being werewolves. It's the Mutt dossier she talked about before, and a book called The Legacy. So The Legacy is basically a book that each alpha of the pack has written in over the centuries. So it's clearly very old if it's over the centuries. The Mutt dossier isn't there. So she grabs The Legacy to kind of have another look. It isn't just history and the genealogy. It's also what the alphas of the past kind of think is important. So one of the alphas in there had a list of experiments he did on mutts to see if they could become immortal. Another alpha was in pursuit of better sex He thought that the sex would be better if it wasn't between two species. Like we said, humans versus werewolves are different kind of species in this book. So he bit a few women and they died. So he decided that women couldn't be turned. He ultimately decided that having sex with and then slitting a woman's throat as he was about to get off was the best way to have
Yeah.
sex.
Because isn't killing the best? Like, come on, it's obviously
Yeah.
the best way to have sex.
She does mention that apparently he was hung in the city for like killing all of the eligible women. But
Good.
it does give you an idea of what werewolves are starting with, that this was an alpha. There's also myths of sorts in the book. One is that Genghis Khan was a werewolf. Also, there was maybe more of like a fable of a young couple, and there was a werewolf kind of like terrorizing them. The man, I guess, chases it off and like cuts off its paw, but keeps running after it. And he goes back to the paw, and it's a hand now. So he goes home, and his wife is binding a bloody stump, and he realizes that she is the wolf. He kills her by slicing open her belly, and a litter of wolves, i.e., his children, kind of pop out, and he goes mad and kills himself because of his guilt.
Yeah, this is like that one legend of the possibility of a female werewolf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the Pax family trees are there as well, which is a very convenient way to give the reader the backstory of all the members of the pack. The current pack has 3 names with no branches before them. So Elena, because she was bitten. Clay, also, because he was bitten and they don't know where he came from. And Logan. So Logan was put up for adoption as a child and basically had an envelope to be given to him at 17, and it had Jeremy's address and Antonio's address on it. Which, like, who wouldn't read that envelope before that child turned 16 and say, hey, maybe we should bring this kid here?
But also, like, I cannot imagine an instance where a letter like that would stay with somebody through the foster care / adoption system. Like, there is no way they would keep that letter.
I know. I don't understand.
And even if nobody looked at it, somebody would just
lose it,
toss it or lose it, or like be malicious and be like, well, I don't care about this, and like rip it up or something.
100%. I completely agree. So Peter, who we met a bit earlier, is the one that told her a lot of these stories, because like obviously these personal stories aren't in the legacy book, but the legacy book is kind of the thing that is making her think of them. So he was very instrumental in telling her a lot of these stories. So she kind of mentions that he was kind of like an uncle, but I just had to wonder, like, if he was being a bit creepy too. Like, is he just doing it because he wants to feel useful? I don't know if there was ulterior motive or not. I just kind of wondered. He feels like an outsider a bit in the pack.
Yeah, I guess, like, I never thought of it in any sort of like creepy way or any sort of way of like him trying to like be useful. I just sort of thought of it as trying to get her involved and like trying to make her feel like one of them, and sort of, I guess, trying to make her less angry because she spent a good portion of the first like however many months of her werewolf time locked in a cage because she couldn't control herself and was like lashing out, couldn't control her changes, was angry, was like destroying things. Like, she needed to sort of to get rid of some of that anger. And I feel like maybe he told her those stories to sort of make her feel like a part of them, like a part of their pack.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to say. I don't even know if we really get into it in this book, but we kind of get into Peter's story now, because I guess Elena's thinking of him. So she says that when Peter was 22, he left the pack just to kind of try out the other side. So I guess he talked to the Alpha, and the Alpha at the time didn't think that he was useful enough as a pack member, but also wasn't worried about him being a dangerous mutt. So he just said, fine. Peter got a job as a sound technician to rock stars and did the whole lifestyle. So during that time, I guess, he did something really bad that would have been a death sentence to any other mutt. And instead of kind of running from it and hoping that no one figured it out, he decided to tell the pack. So he called Jeremy because Jeremy's the one everyone goes to. So Jeremy came to LA, cleaned up all the traces of anything that Peter did, and then he brought Peter back to the pack without telling anyone why he did. So he just brought him back and was like, he's rejoining the pack. And the Alpha was like, okay, cool, that's fine. But nobody actually found out, other than Jeremy, what was the reasoning behind him kind of coming back.
At the time.
Yes, obviously. He's probably told everybody now because he's back in the pack, so he doesn't care.
Yeah.
Peter is still a sound tech and obviously a devout follower of Jeremy's because Jeremy saved his life. And I know Jeremy kind of like deserves his following because he's saved Peter, he saved Antonio and Nick basically through Antonio, and Clay obviously is like the biggest example of it. And then Elena feels indebted to him. So like he's clearly a great leader and like everybody feels indebted to him, but it's still a lot, especially from someone coming from outside who he was kind of her jailer in the beginning of her wolf life. So it's like seeing everybody else worship him almost is got to be a lot.
Well, and then too, like he's literally covering up murders for his pack members.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of insinuated that mutts who don't have the protection of the pack are, probably getting hunted down and punished for those same things.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like a bit hypocritical of Jeremy to just be like, oh, well, because you're pack, then you're okay and I'll do this for you.
Yeah.
But if you're not pack, like, look out.
Exactly. So I guess at this point, she obviously has been thinking about all this while she's looking at the book. So Antonio and Peter interrupt her reading and drag her out for a walk. And they kind of go outside and talk about who they think the mutt in the area is. So who killed the girl and left her on Stonehaven property and pack property. Antonio guesses that it's Daniel, and that is someone that we heard about above. So he used to be a pack member because he was a pack child, and he was Clay's age and Nick's age. And he knows how bad murdering in this territory is, obviously. He apparently hates Clay with a capital Hates, but he also hates Jeremy with lowercase, but is maybe also in love / obsessed with Elena, which I guess kind of makes sense because she is the only female werewolf.
Yeah, I think a lot of the wolves, and mutts especially, are obsessed with Elena.
Yeah, which I completely understand it. Like, she's the only one that exists. It's obviously like, I think she said above in her head that she's like a trophy would be, which kind of makes you wonder why she wants to leave the pack, because you wouldn't think that she'd want to leave the protection. But
well, it's also sort of one of those things, like one of those base animal things where all the men are sort of fighting over the most desirable female.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that happens in the animal kingdom all the time.
Yes.
And she's the most desirable female just because she's the only one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So Peter thinks that Daniel is like too smart to do this and he's not suicidal enough. So he's betting on Zachary Kane being the mutt behind it all because he's a big dumb oaf. They kind of discuss, I guess, all of the big player mutts, and they talk about Carl Marston, and he is another mutt that apparently he killed a mutt over a territory dispute, but then told Antonio about it while he wined and dined him. And he seems very smart, and he kind of does things right.
Yeah, he's very like civilized and proper and like couth, we'll say. Like he doesn't let his wolf side control him. He's very cool, calm, and collected.
Yeah.
Like I feel like he would be the type to send thank you cards.
Yes.
Right? He's very proper.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so Elena agrees that she thinks that it's Daniel as well, but she knows that she's kind of biased about it, um, because she knows how much that Daniel hates Clay. Um, and then she asks Peter and Antonio if they know where his last location was, but they say that nobody's really keeping track anymore. And she kind of feels bad about it because it used to be her job, and they kind of don't want her to feel bad about it, but it is, I guess, kind of her fault that she didn't explicitly tell Jeremy that she wasn't coming back. So he kind of just hoped and didn't give the job away to anybody else.
But like he could have temporarily had someone else do it.
Someone else fill in. Yeah. Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Like there's no reason why it could just like if it was an important job, and it does seem like an important job, he should have gotten somebody else to fill in.
Yeah, definitely. But she's the one, she feels bad now about it. So it's just something about, I guess, her character more so than, well, both of their characters, really. The fact that he just assumes that she's going to come back, and she feels bad about something that, like, it's been 16 months. And yes, she says that she's run away before for like days or weeks. I think maybe even sometimes months, but like 16 months is a long time. You
Yeah.
can't just leave this for that long. It feels like a bit of complacency on Jeremy's side.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that night, Nick pulls Elena into Clay's room, and he has like a for reals serial killer altar dedicated to Elena.
Like you,
Which she
now
kind of glosses over a bit in the book. She's just like, and it's there on the wall. Yay. Not yay, but she's like, it's on the wall.
now like she does liken it to like a serial killer altar, but it's really just a bunch of pictures. Like it's not like there's no like satanic symbols or like jars of hair or finger toenails or anything like that.
Oh my God, no. Ooh, imagine. But it is funny because there's like religious symbols and stuff on his bedspread or something, like based on just the design of his room, because that is what he studied. It's just kind of funny that he has those on his bedspread.
Yeah.
Completely unrelated, but just a funny thing. So yeah, Nick kind of throws her on the bed, and we get more of their physical relationship, about how close they are. And it kind of is a contrast of how at like arm's length she's keeping Clay in her human form, because she won't let Clay touch her at all basically now as a human.
I will say that the way Nick and her, like the way they interact, it makes me wonder if like the three of them have ever done like had a threesome or something like that, because he's very physical with her. And like yeah, like if I had a guy, or not if I like having guy friends, I've had, I have male friends, but none of them are that like, and none of them try and touch my boobs.
Yeah. But I think that's more so like the writer trying to show that they are more physical and animal together than human.
I
Like they're
guess.
more into physical touch than humans normally are, and like it's kind of a normal thing. That's kind of what I get from it, but also I would 100% read the book that is the three of them. Like I am so here for that.
Because this is a reoccurring thing that happens, like him being physical with her, like it's reoccurring, or throwing her suggestive looks, or like, you know, all that. It's, and she's not like, she doesn't imply that there's one-sided feelings or anything like that. Like it is completely like just normalized.
Yeah.
So that's why I sort of like,
I can't imagine.
I get that vibe.
Yeah. I can't imagine Clay letting it happen. I don't know, like maybe sometime in the future.
Maybe. Anyway.
Yeah. I guess Clay kind of comes into the room and they talk about the hunt that they're about to go on a bit. And she is very excited about the hunt, but they're also, I guess, physical again. Clay's kind of like touching the inside of her arm, and I read it that she kind of gets turned on a bit.
I have this, and it's very obvious.
Okay.
So like, this is another reason that I sort of am like, roll my eyes at Elena, because she literally went from last night getting in being like, don't you dare touch me, and now tonight, so he touches the inside of her elbow. Her gaze swept over his face, taking in the line of his jaw, the tendons on his neck, the dark blonde shadow on his chin, and the curve of his lips. Heat started in the pit of her stomach and radiated down. He swiveled back to face me. His pupils were dilated, and I could smell his excitement. He gave me a hoarse chuckle, leaned toward me, and whispered those three magical little words. Time to hunt. So, like, yes, she was aroused.
Yes.
And he could smell it. And in turn, he was aroused.
Yeah.
So, like, she's so friggin' hot and cold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you were saying earlier, 100%. But also, it's one of those things where you're like, I would die if someone could smell it off me. I'm just always going to go back to that. But
yeah, I mean, it's rightfully so, because like you could get turned on by anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then
this isn't about
can you imagine if that was something everybody could do, and then you're just walking down the street and some rando turns to you and is like, I know what you're thinking of.
You don't.
It would be very awkward.
Yeah. So they go to town for their hunt. Elena changes between two dumpsters. And she kind of thinks about how the pack teaches you to change more often so that you have more control. So I guess if you wait for your change to take over, then it could happen anytime, even if you're not ready. Like you could be in the grocery store or in a meeting, so it can be very inconvenient, obviously. And if you wait too long, then you're not as in control while you're in your wolf body. So the pack's mentality or their teachings is to change more often so that you have control. So obviously she didn't do that in Toronto. In the beginning of the book, we heard that she was itching for the change. So it does take her 3 times longer than normal to change, and then she needs to rest afterwards. Luckily, though, her and Clay and Nick are kind of in different areas searching, so neither of the guys kind of notice that she is taking a long time and struggling. After she's searched for a bit, she hears a howl, and she knows it's from Clay, and she knows that he's found something. So she kind of runs towards the sound, and on her way to him, she catches the scent of a wolf she doesn't recognize. So she ends up meeting Clay at the Mutt's apartment, and it's empty, but they, I guess, break in and they smell a kill or like a deteriorating body kind of smell inside. So they know that the Mutt has killed somebody here. The body isn't there any longer. So like a human might not smell it, but with their smelling as wolves, they can tell that it's there. Oh yeah. they change back to human form to break in to the apartment. And I guess from the smell, they can kind of figure out that Mutt is newly changed. So they kind of just assume that it is a young and dumb hereditary wolf because obviously, like we said, most of bitten wolves don't live. So chances are it would be a hereditary wolf. They basically have to obviously change back to go get their clothes. Elena's clothes is on the other side of a highway, and she can't just run back naked. Elena obviously struggled to change between the two dumpsters, so now the two guys are around, and she has to change again. So she struggles again, but she does manage to change. And I feel like we're not given any times, but I feel like it takes her less time to change this time than it did between the two dumpsters.
Yeah, and we should say too that they talk about how changing is a very private situation. Like while they're very comfortable with each other once they're in their wolf forms, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, they do like changing on their own. Like they don't like seeing each other like halfway through a change. It's considered sort of like taboo, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah, it's like probably almost like what it is being naked as humans around each other is a bit
Yeah.
not normal. So for them, I feel like that's equivalent to the change because they're completely fine being naked around each other. They don't care one bit.
Yeah.
So on their way back to getting their clothes, they're in an alley and there's two kids kind of coming towards them, and Clay and Nick have managed to like hunch down into a doorway where they're out of sight, but Elena is a bit more out in the open. She's kind of just hiding behind some trash, basically, I think. So one of the boys stumbles and kind of sees her as he's falling, and if he hadn't have seen her, he would have just walked past and been none the wiser and been fine. But because he sees her, he obviously panics and tells the other kid, hey, there's a giant wolf here. One of the kids runs away, but the other one kind of takes a broken bottle and is like about to attack her, which seems very dumb. And like,
the only thing I will say is that it's sort of, they really were not supposed to be seen because everyone in town thinks a wild dog killed this woman. If it goes around that there's wolves around, well, then people are going to start looking for wolves. And if you're a werewolf running in the woods, that's sort of maybe not the best situation for you to be in. So
yeah,
it was a really bad situation that they were, like the fact that they were seen.
definitely. Yeah. So Clay's, I guess, first instinct here is obviously to protect Elena from this kid with glass. But she kind of, I guess, jumps into him and stops him. And then the three of them run off away from this kid with glass. And they're more careful, but they make it back to their clothes and then drive back to Stonehaven. So they get back, and I guess Jeremy is up in his room. So they go to kind of tell him what's going on. And he's just like, did you find the mutt? Did you kill him? And they're like, we found his apartment and we couldn't kill him. And he's like, tell me about it in the morning. This is like, I don't need you to tell me about it now. If you didn't kill him, then we'll deal with it tomorrow. So they had kind of been running and racing to see who would tell him first because they're very competitive. So they decide to play poker. It's kind of a funny moment after that because Elena kind of mentions that the guys will take their clothes off like a mating ritual, thinking that she'll do what they want because they're so hot. And like at that point, Nick takes his shirt off and she says she does do what they want, but that's not the point. It's not because of that. And it's just like, it's 100% because he took his shirt off. But like, I also understand. I guess Nick and Elena are in the room first and they kind of like nuzzle at each other's neck, but as humans. So it's just like kissing each other's necks, basically.
Again, another like, makes
Very
me
sexual.
Yeah, it's another reason why I think that we have this threesome-ish relationship. Like, hot, like making out with each other's necks. Like, that is not a friend thing to do.
No. But then Clay does come back and he like sends Nick to go find the cards. And Nick is like, where are the cards? And he's like, you can go find them. You can go figure it out, basically. So you can kind of get that Clay is a bit jealous of the physical relationship that Nick easily has with Elena.
So Nick took the clip from her hair and nibbled her ear. She relaxed on the bed and his lips moved down her neck. I twisted my face, nuzzling his neck and inhaling the musky scent of him. I moved to the hollow in his collarbone and felt his heartbeat leap. So, like, it definitely seems more like that they, I don't know, man. Like, I just feel like there's something there.
Yeah. So, yeah, Clay tells him to leave because I do think he's jealous of the easy intimacy that Nick and Elena have when clearly she's pushing him away.
Yeah.
And I guess he comes back with the cards and they decide on the terms. I think it's kind of funny we don't hear what Nick wants. But if Clay wins, then Elena has to go to the woods with him. And if she wins, she gets to kill the mutt. And the section ends with the words, Clay won. So that's ominous, especially for the ends of this section.
Yeah, so I guess the insinuation is, they go outside and have a bit of romantic, sexy times. And for her, like, it doesn't seem like he offers, like, her to kill the mutt. And I guess in our minds, that the way she wants to be with Philip, to me, like, the way she wants to be with Philip is not resonating with a werewolf that wants to kill the mutt. Like, this seems like something undesirable, but in fact, she's very excited to get to kill the mutt. Like,
yeah,
she's just denying the way she tries to portray herself. She's denying such a huge part of what she's actually like. So, like, she has a violent side. So.
Yeah, for sure.
So that about wraps it up for this week. You can tune in next week for figuring out what happens in the woods. If you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions for us, you can email us at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com. And be sure to check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Coffee and Co-Read.
So next week, we'll be reading part 2 of Bitten by Kelley Armstrong, and that is chapter 7 to 14, which are titled Blame to Mistrust. We'd also like to give a trigger warning for DubCon, which is dubious consent, in next week's chapters. So just a heads up that is a bit of a theme that we talk about. And make sure to follow along. And if you're enjoying our little chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you find our content. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you on the next page.